Instead of an army, he had 12 men. Others tried to say he was a god, but he never said so himself. He didn't own a horse. He never founded a city. And when he died, there was no golden hearse. Yet the force of his character has endured and grown, while the most charismatic leader who ever lived is of little interest to anyone except historians. Because character is what's left after charisma is gone. I'd like to elaborate a bit on a comparison I made earlier about how creating your character is like an artist creating a sculpture. The essential point is this: I don't think character is something that just happens by itself, any more than a chisel can create a work of art without the hand of an artist guiding it. In both instances, a conscious decision has been made. A conscious process of design is at work. Character is the result of hundreds and hundreds of choices you may make that gradually turn who you are at any given moment into who you want to be. If that decision-making process is not present, you'll still be somebody. You'll still be alive, but may have a personality rather than a character. And to me, that's something very different. This has always been a country in which people have felt free to change themselves and the circumstances in which they live. In this regard, I happen to come across some interesting facts about the 19th century settlers who crossed the plains in covered wagons. For the most part, these people were neither recent arrivals on our shores, nor were they facing any special economic difficulties. Instead, they were shopkeepers, farmers, and tradesmen who simply decided to make some big changes in their lives in the hope of finding something better, despite all the dangers and uncertainties. No one really knows why this great migration began, but I suspect it had something to do with our fundamental belief in individual freedom and the idea that if there's something better at the end of the rainbow, we have a responsibility to take advantage of it. That's the basis for our discussion of character in this program. Character isn't something you were born with and can't change like your fingerprints. It's something you weren't born with and that you must take responsibility for making. You may not be able to cross the Rocky Mountains in a covered wagon, but you can still create a better life for yourself by crossing the mountains of your soul, and that may be even a greater challenge. There used to be a joke about football teams that lost every game. The coach would say, "Well, we built a lot of character this year, didn't we?" As if character is something that you settle for when you haven't achieved what you really wanted. Or as if character is something that automatically develops in you as a result of adversity. I don't buy that. I don't think adversity by itself builds character, and I certainly don't think that success erodes it. You can build character by how you respond to what happens in your life, whether it's winning every game or losing every game, or getting rich or dealing with hard times. You build character out of certain qualities that you must create and diligently nurture within yourself, just like you would plant and water a seed or gather wood and build a campfire. You've got to look for those things in your heart and in your gut. You've got to chisel away in order to find them, just like chiseling away rock in order to create the sculpture that has previously existed only in your imagination. But the really amazing thing about character is that if you're sincerely committed to making yourself into the person you want to be, you'll not only create those qualities, you'll strengthen them and recreate them in abundance, even as you're drawing on them every day of your life. Like the burning bush in the biblical book of Exodus, the bush that burned, but it was not consumed by the flames. Character sustains itself and nurtures itself, even as it's being put to work and tested and challenged. In this program, we're going to explore the 12 qualities that I believe are the pillars of unshakable character. We're going to talk about integrity and why doing the right thing is always in your best interest. We'll consider honesty, and we'll see why it always comes down to being honest with yourself. We'll look at perseverance, and we'll see how it can overcome virtually any obstacle. We'll explore the quality of wisdom, and we'll see why knowing the facts of a situation isn't always the same as knowing the truth. We'll discuss personal responsibility and why, like Harry Truman, you should adopt a buck stops here mentality. We'll discuss humor, and we'll see why people of character know the importance of being able to laugh at yourself. We'll define the quality of flexibility, and we'll see why it's more important today than ever before. We'll talk about patience, and we'll see why it's as important to be able to wait as it is to work. We'll look at confidence, and we'll see why being able to inspire yourself is the first step in leading others. We'll explore good health, and we'll see how a strong body and mind contribute to strong character. We'll discuss the true nature of achievement, and we'll see why it can't really be measured except in your own heart. And there's one more pillar of an unshakable character that we're going to talk about right now. As you take your metaphorical chisel in hand and set about discovering and creating the various qualities of character within yourself, you're going to need this one perhaps more than all the others. Since ancient times, philosophers have seen it as the basis of all real achievement. This is the quality of courage. There's a book that tells the stories of all the winners of the Congressional Medal of Honor. It's a book that will bring tears to your eyes. It's one of the most powerful documents ever written. One American after another who put aside all thought of safety and faced down death in the service of this country. And more often than not, it's been in order to save other Americans rather than to defeat an enemy. When you read of their exploits, you realize that these were people who simply lost their fear of death in order to do what had to be done. Yes, those Medal of Honor winners were courageous individuals, but by itself, is overcoming the fear of death necessarily an expression of courage? I don't doubt that there are many people in this country who break the law and aren't afraid to die in the process, but I wouldn't call them courageous. And there are people who do deliberately foolhardy things with their cars that jeopardize their own lives and the lives of others, but they aren't courageous people. In fact, a hungry donkey will keep eating until his stomach bursts, even if you hit him with a stick trying to make him stop. He's overcome his fear all right, but he's obviously not courageous. We might not be able to precisely define it, but we intuitively sense that there are some differences between acts of rashness and the accomplishments of those winners of the Congressional Medal of Honor. Let me sum up in a couple of sentences what those differences reveal about the true nature of courage. I can't put it any better than the Greek philosopher Aristotle did more than 2,000 years ago. A truly courageous person is not someone who never feels fear, but who fears the right thing at the right time in the right way. What exactly does that mean? What does it mean to fear the right thing in the right way at the right time? To find the answer, let's look at some specific sources of fear that many individuals are facing right now. First, a great many people today are afraid of what might happen to them financially. And it's certainly true that great changes are taking place in the economy that will have a direct impact on the lives of millions of people. I've heard it said that a corporation that employs 10,000 men and women today may only need 1/5 that many within 10 years. Over the last 50 years, whole sections of our society have learned to identify with the corporation that employed them. That corporation provided not only a salary but health benefits and the opportunity to create a pension fund that would make retirement possible at age 65 or even sooner. Now that relationship between the employer and the corporation is changing. Much of the work that used to be done by domestic workers can now be done more cheaply overseas, and companies are taking advantage of that, perhaps out of necessity, perhaps simply to fatten the bottom line. In any case, the fear of losing one's job has now reached a segment of the white-collar workforce that's never been faced with it in quite this way. What else are we afraid of? Many people are concerned about their health. They're afraid that they'll get sick because they're not getting enough exercise, or because they're eating the wrong things, or because of chemicals in the air or in their food or water. In fact, I think people today are even more frightened of these things than they were in the past, when epidemics of disease and poor sanitation were everywhere. And with regard to their health, people are also afraid of the expenses that might result if they were to become sick or disabled, or the expenses they might have to bear if this were to happen to a parent or a family member. So financial fears and health-related fears are two of our major concerns. But the third thing that I sense really scares people today is a bit less easy to categorize. It's kind of a general feeling that things aren't as good as they used to be, that there's been a loss of control at some basic level of our society. There's a sense that one earthquake after another, some large and obvious, some smaller and almost imperceptible, have accumulated to shift the foundations of society, and it's going to keep on shifting toward a result that's anything but good. Now, keeping in mind our idea that a courageous person is not someone who never feels fear, but who fears the right thing at the right time in the right way, let's ask ourselves if these fears really fit that definition. I think if we look a little deeper, we'll see that what really scares people about these situations is the sense that they're going to be helpless, that all their trust was placed in somebody or something, and now they've been let down and they can't do anything. They're helpless. But remember, you're never really helpless. And the sense that you are helpless, or that you might be if certain things were to happen, is something we really ought to be afraid of, and that we should refuse to accept. You're never just a victim of circumstances. No matter what happens, you're never without options that can get you back on track. It takes courage to recognize that, because it means accepting responsibility for your own future. But I would suggest that we should accept that responsibility because no one is really going to accept it for us, no matter what we may have been led to believe. Let me emphasize that underlying most fear is the fear of helplessness, of being victimized or being blown around by the winds of fate like a leaf is blown off a tree. But is that really a legitimate way of looking at things? To me, it sounds like being afraid of the dark, in which case the best thing to do is to get yourself up, out of bed, and switch on the light. After all, the people who built this country didn't feel helpless when they faced obstacles that we can hardly even imagine today. I'm not saying we should all just gather around the campfire and tell stories about George Washington, but we should realize that every generation has faced insecurities and lived with them and triumphed over them. It's only in the past 50 years or so people have come to expect a life without real tough times and real difficulties. But adversity isn't something to fear. It's something to expect, something to prepare for, and something to overcome. The truly courageous person is not immune to fear, but it plays a different role in his or her life than it does for other people. If you're a courageous person, your fears aren't about